We've got breaking news in the NFL where Calvin Ridley is headed to Tennessee on a 4-year deal worth $92 million and $50 million in guarantees. That's the latest from our NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. Ridley had 76 catches for more than 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns in this past season with the Jaguars. He'll play alongside DeAndre Hopkins in Tennessee with second-year quarterback Will Levis and new running back Tony Pollard. Let's bring in the man of the hour, Jonathan Jones, with this news. Jonathan, we had Pete Prisco and Brady Quinn on the show earlier today, and both of them were pretty certain that Calvin Ridley would stay in Jacksonville. As we know, that's no longer the case here. So just sort of give us the rundown in the decision for Calvin Ridley to make the move to Tennessee.
So yesterday, Haley, I reported that, of course, the Titans and the Jaguars and the Patriots were very much involved in Calvin Ridley. Obviously, Calvin Ridley being with the Jaguars, the Patriots needing a #1 wide receiver and feeling very confident about the offer that they had out there for him. But there was always a dark horse that was lurking, and no one could really tell exactly who it was. Some intel that I got was that the Titans, while interested in Calvin Ridley, thought that his number was going to be a little too high. And so it looked like maybe they were on the outs, or maybe that was just classic smoke that was out there. Obviously, that is the case. And so Calvin Ridley, who's from the South, I had been told he wanted to stay in the South, that, you know, obviously money was a factor. Taxes, cost of living was a factor, and that was working against the New England Patriots, even though they had a very good offer out there for Calvin Ridley. And so now today, once we get to the 4 o'clock, I don't want to call it a deadline, but at the start of the new league year where he can sign somewhere, and if he signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars, they wouldn't have to give a second-round pick back to his former team, the Atlanta Falcons. It would be just a third-round pick. The clock strikes 4, and then 4:01, 4:02, and we're waiting for Calvin Ridley to re-sign back with the Jaguars. And then as time goes along, well then what's going on here? And then that idea of a dark horse candidate really started to set in. And so now you have the Tennessee Titans, who had something on the order of $80-ish million in cap space, in the top 3 in the NFL in terms of cap space. You have a second-year general manager in Rand Carthon with a second-year quarterback in Will Levis, trying to take that step in that division, a division that looks like the Houston Texans could be running away with, and you have to get a wide receiver in free agency while DeAndre Hopkins is getting a little gray in the beard. And yes, you want to draft some guys, but you need a vet. And so you go out and you get Calvin Ridley, the top free agent wide receiver on the market, the best one that ever actually hit the market, forgetting the guys who got tagged. And that's what the Tennessee Titans did today.
$50 million in guaranteed money. That says a lot about what they think about what they're getting out of their wide receiver. Now, in terms of the offense that he's joining, it kind of feels like this Titans team is coming together. You, of course, have DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks in that wide receiver room. Now you bring in the additions of Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, the ground game getting going here. How much of a benefit is this for Will Levis going into his, what we would presume to be his first full year as the starter, and being the young guy sort of wanting to get the Titans back on track here?
Yeah, it's huge for him, of course. I mean, look what Calvin Ridley has done for so many of his quarterbacks. You go back, he had a 1,300-yard season in 2020 with the Atlanta Falcons. We know that he missed the 2022 season because being suspended all season due to gambling. And then last year, I guess you could call it a down year. I know a lot of people would take a down year with 1,000 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns that he got with Trevor Lawrence and the group that was there with Trevor Lawrence when he was out with his various injuries. And so, look, I think that that's pretty good if that is your down year. Again, though, he's going to be entering his age 30 season, so he's in that really nice, I would call it a sweet spot of, yeah, he's going to be that veteran presence, but man, he still has that speed. Of course, he got into the NFL at 24 years old and missed his age 28 season, so he doesn't have the NFL mileage on him that you would necessarily expect from someone going into his age 30 season. Really like what the Tennessee Titans are doing right here. They have a new head coach, obviously, in Brian Callahan, the former Bengals offensive coordinator. They have the best offensive line coach that's out there. and Brian Callahan's dad, Bill Callahan, so you know that they're going to be blocked up well. And now you have Tony Pollard, who's coming from a fantastic Dallas Cowboys system with a really good quarterback in Dak Prescott. You're starting to add out from the inside out is what these Tennessee Titans have been doing ever since Carthon took over. And look, this was not going to be an easy fix for the new regime in Tennessee when you consider how many first and second round picks they had missed on in the last couple of years. It's really, really hard to build a sort of division champion contender, a conference championship caliber roster when you miss on so many top draft picks as these Titans have. And so they had to dig out a little bit of some cap situation. They've had to cover up some of the blemishes that occurred before they got in there along the way. And now they have a new offensive-minded head coach with some really strong pieces that they have been able to develop in various ways through a number of various acquisitions. And so now I think we're going to see the Tennessee Titans again in a division that for the longest time was the laughingstock, Haley, of the NFL. Now you have a Jacksonville Jaguars team that still looks pretty strong without Calvin Ridley. Of course, you have a Houston Texans team that has the offensive and defensive rookies of the year on their squad, and they only just got better this week in free agency. And then an Indianapolis Colts team that when they get Anthony Richardson back, they are going to be a force to be reckoned with. So forget all your jokes about the AFC South. They're absolutely for real in 2024.
Yeah, I know. I was just looking at your tweet that you reposted from the Combine with your conversation with Ran Carthon saying, quote, "We plan to use it, but we have to exercise patience. When we spend the money, it's going to make sense." And now you see that sort of coming to fruition here with this signing. In terms of the conference as a whole, because you kind of alluded to it here, the AFC South just continuing to make moves. This one interesting, though, JJ, because you're taking from a team within your division. We saw that as well with Saquon Barkley going from the Giants to the Eagles. How much of a pattern has that become in teams maybe scouting players from other teams within the division? And how much of a benefit is it that Calvin Ridley has seen this Tennessee offense before? He kind of knows what he can bring to the table.
Well, I think we see it a little bit more in some other divisions. The NFC North is sort of famous for that, as well as the AFC North, right? We've seen a number of sort of Steelers become Ravens or vice versa, or someone who used to be in Cincinnati going elsewhere. So it usually happens in those two divisions, but this certainly isn't unheard of. And, of course, it helps when you don't have to send a draft pick. You never want to really trade within the division, or at least most teams do not. And so this does help a bit here. Look, this is a Tennessee offense that obviously struggled last year. And they had Ryan Tannehill, who was injured. They had Will Levis, who, needed some time to get up and get going. Derrick Henry. This is going to be a really brand new looking offense, one that a number of folks should be very excited about. And again, if you believe that DeAndre Hopkins still has some gas in the tank, and he showed that he did this past season, if you think that they're going to do a better job blocking, and I think that they will, if you think that they're going to have another dimension to their running game with Tony Pollard, then I think that they will. And now, of course, having Calvin Ridley be able to find those soft spots in the zone, run away from defenders. Again, I think that the Tennessee Titans are keeping up quite nicely with everyone else in the division as best they can.
Yeah, definitely this time of year where things are moving around and shifting around. JJ, I want to circle back to the beginning of the conversation. You mentioned that the Patriots were interested in getting a deal done with Calvin Ridley. It obviously fell apart, but to that end, it means Boston is still sort of looking to boost, I should say, that wide receiver room. Devontae Parker no longer there as well. I know T. Higgins is on that franchise tag, but are you hearing anything about possible moves there for the Patriots as they move past Calvin Ridley not joining their team?
Well, obviously they've had to have a plan B in place. They're not fools, and as it looked like Calvin Ridley may not be going to the New England Patriots, I'm sure that Elliott Wolf, who's essentially the de facto general manager there, and his group was cobbling together some sort of plan if the plan had not already been in place. The wide receiver market, outside of a couple of guys, really has stayed still. And so of the free agents, right? We know that Mike Evans went out there and got a deal. Michael Pittman Jr., who was tagged, got that deal. T. Higgins is going to be really, really hard to acquire via trade, and I don't know that you're going to want to give up the amount of capital that it would take and pay him in order to acquire his services. And so, look, there's plenty of wide receivers that are out there. You're going to have a Hollywood Brown that is available, and that's one of the first ones that comes to mind. Mike Williams, who was just released from the LA Chargers, he's going to be available, though he has dealt with injuries. That's sort of been the thing about this wide receiver group in free agency, is that after you got past Calvin Ridley, there was no surefire #1 wide receiver, and so you're not going to overspend. This is the largest wide receiver contract that we're going to see in free agency, and it may be by far. The rest of the guys that we're going to see are going to be paid like #2, #3 wide receivers now that we're really in day 3 of free agency and we continue to move forward. And then, of course, you have a very deep draft class, one where you could see 8, 9, 10 wide receivers taken in the first 32 to 35 picks in April's draft. So the Patriots are going to have some options, but as far as #1 receiving options outside of the top 3, outside of a Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't know that one of those exists in free agency.
Yeah, it's hard to remember that draft is still coming up with these 3 days, 4 days of buzz that we've seen in free agency. You mentioned Hollywood Brown. He is now Pete Prisco's top free agent wide receiver on his list of 100. Jonathan Jones joining us, keeping us updated. JJ, I know you're so busy right now. I hope you get some rest, get to recover a little bit there. A lot of moving parts in the NFL. Hey, you can stay up to date at home by downloading the CBS Sports app. You can scan that QR code on your screen. It takes you directly to all of the free agency moves and news that we've been seeing throughout this week and will extend on, obviously, as the new league year gets underway. Plenty of news and storylines to follow, so be sure to download your CBS Sports app.